This week on CrunchWeek, we're discussing all the news and madness around Google's developer conference, Google I/O, and Square's latest hardware push stand. Welcome to CrunchWeek. I'm Lena Rao.
I'm Drew Olanoff.
I'm Ryan Lawler.
Yes.
We'll get that one right one day. So this week we're discussing a lot around Google I/O, Google's big developer conference.
Yep.
Drew, you were there. Ryan, I think you were there. I wasn't. I was watching from afar. But a lot to discuss, I feel. What do you think, Drew? I mean, you're the Google Glass wearer, so let's talk about that.
Yeah.
What do you think about some of the announcements they made around the apps and the ecosystem now that's being built around the technology?
Yeah. First things first, it was nice to actually see other people wearing glass. And there were moments where I was like, wow, that's what I look like when I'm wearing them. That was kind of scary. But no, I think this year, there were no huge announcements. There were no jumping out of a blimp or anything like that. It was almost a 4-hour-long keynote with Q&A. We'll get to that. But some of the announcements were very just foundational, new numbers for Android, activations, Chrome numbers, #1 browser, #1 mobile OS, that kind of stuff. Maps has been completely just blown up and started from the beginning. Some features that are in mobile for search are making their way to the desktop. You can now do conversational search with your computer by saying, "Okay, Google." So it was a lot of things like that, and then Larry Page came on stage at the end.
Yeah, I kind of felt like it was interesting. Like philosophically, there was no real big announcements. Like they made a lot of changes with features sort of behind the scenes, but there wasn't like a new Android build. They didn't make major updates to the Chrome browser. They didn't announce any new hardware or anything like that.
Like last year,
like last
kind
year.
of compared to last year, where
last year was
sort of
new
revealed.
hardware, and it was the Nexus 7, and look at all this new hardware. I think for this year they kind of just wanted to bring it back down to earth a little bit.
What do you feel like what the overarching theme was? Larry got up and talked a lot about innovation and things like that. I mean, is there a direction you feel like Google's heading in? I mean, I would say the company's gotten a lot of criticism over the past few years just because it seems like they're going in every direction. And where's the real strategy? Did you have any perspective on that?
I mean, I think they're kind of reeling it back in to show some of the consumer benefits, right? All that data collection, all the things that you're searching on, while it might seem kind of creepy, they're finally starting to show how it would benefit you with Google Now by knowing what location is your work and what's home, and giving you directions and transit directions, and kind of pulling everything together and allowing the developers to build off of that. I've been interested to hear what Ryan thinks.
And automatically making you look more beautiful, whether you like updating your photos sort of behind the scenes. Like they made big. They announced 41 new features
for Google Plus,
to Google Plus that no one will use. But it was just kind of like, they had this automatic image updating software to make everything look better, which was kind of creepy. And also like piecing together like photos for you. I don't know. I kind of felt like it was things like that. Like there are consumer benefits. It's just a question of like, can we get past like the creepiness factor?
I'll be honest, it feels synthetic. I mean, when you see all that automatic processing using all of Nick's software stuff, we're not talking about a filter. We're talking about like skin softening, wrinkle removal, like all these things. And while you can look at the original, you're now presented with what Google thinks should be the finished product. It's like, that scares me because I'm like, I want to see what people see, wrinkles and all.
That's not reality.
It's not. And while it's a nice whiz-bang feature, you walk away from that thinking, okay, that's just kind of the scrub version of what you shared. And I hope that's not a theme going forward with everything.
I kind of want to talk about Larry's keynote. I felt like Larry Page came out on stage and he was up there for a good long time, between his actual discussion and taking Q&A, he was probably on stage for about 45 minutes, maybe even longer. And basically the theme of the discussion seemed to be, we're only at like 1% we've only reached like 1% of what's possible with technology, and we kind of get caught up in all these little details, but there's so much more that we can do. So I don't know, from the standpoint of like a motto, or if you're gonna look past the like "don't be evil" stuff,
Right.
Sort of a credo. Like I thought that was kind of interesting.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Greg wrote a piece about something Larry Page said, something about like this utopia, this place where people could go work on technology and not be affected by their surroundings, and
Right.
it sounded kind of like a
It's
Google
certainly
Island.
like an interesting contrast to Eric Schmidt. Like, I mean, it's sort of like I don't
Exactly.
think Eric Schmidt would get up there and sort of talk about this utopia
No.
and all of that. I mean, it's an interesting, maybe new direction for Google when it comes to leadership.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like he basically wants to build Burning Man.
He even mentioned Burning Man.
Let's
He
I was like,
rebuild
where are you
Burning-
going with this, Larry? What are you going to talk about?
I'll tell you what, like Matt Honan did
Yes.
this wonderful piece, Welcome to Google Island, which is amazing. Just talking about, sort of Google's like playland for new technologies and the type of thing that they could do. So that was really interesting. I also felt like it almost was like that first like Steve Jobs keynote. Like this was like sort of that Steve Jobs moment, right? Where Steve Jobs just came back from Apple, I think it was 96 or 97 WWDC, and just took questions from the audience and sort of brought things back, like had like a real human sort of moment there. And I think, when you think about Google, you don't think about the human aspect of things.
Nope.
Right. Well, certainly it will be interesting to see what happens with some of these things that they announced in the future, and Glass, it sounds like, got some apps. So
Got some new apps,
maybe
and-
Drew will be testing some of those out for us, and
Yeah.
we'll
I've already
report
had
back.
to turn Twitter off because there's just too many notifications. That's for another day.
But before we end today, I wanted to just talk about Square's big hardware push
Yes.
this week, which is actually a pretty big deal when any company, releases new hardware. A lot of work goes into that. But they released a new stand for the iPad, which is essentially a credit card swiper. But I think, sort of bigger picture, it really symbolizes the company's big push into the iPad world, and
Right.
that it's really an iPad-focused point of sale system and register. The stand itself turns the iPad into a freestanding register, as opposed
Right.
to the dongle that just like hooked into the jack of the iPad. So this is a big deal. I think it's a little bit more expensive for restaurants or merchants. It's
Right.
$299
Okay.
as opposed to free for the other hardware. But
Right.
it really makes them
pretty.
bad on the iPad, and it's pretty. It's very Apple-esque. Like the box, it makes you feel like it almost feels like the box you get when you get a MacBook or an Apple computer.
Interesting. I like that it swivels. Like you
Yeah,
you can
it's
do
really
your
cool.
thing and then swivel it around to the customer, and they can send
Yeah,
out
and the
thing.
swiper's really cool. It's kind of on the bottom, and you just swipe it through.
Right.
And I got to test it out a little bit at Blue Bottle Coffee, which is where they had the event this week.
Cool.
And it seems like Dorsey's pretty excited about it. You have to kind of wonder, whenever you make a new hardware push, like is that going to make anything else obsolete? Like the other components. But we'll
In a
see.
weird way, I kind of felt like this was like actually a step back,
You
because
do.
because Square's whole mission has been sort of this like seamless payment where I mean, with like Square Wallet or whatever, like where they were going with this was like you sort of walk into Blue Bottle and you just have your phone on you and you don't have to do anything.
Right.
You just like tell them your name and they can, the clerk or the barista or whatever can actually just instantly charge your Square account.
Which you can still do with that iPad stand.
Right.
It's just this is more for the merchant focused.
Yeah,
side
I
of
think
things.
the other interesting thing about it, when you think about the actual event You know, they had all of the tech reporters
they
from
did.
all of the San Francisco blogs and like
New York, but even like the New York Times was there, the Wall Street Journal. I mean, it
Right.
was very, it was a lot. It was like
Right.
this
Small
I've never
space.
seen so many tech reporters in one small space.
And meanwhile, PayPal and somebody else also released their like point of sale system, like
PayPal
announced
the
a
day
point of
before
sale,
or something?
like
It was kind of like a cash for clunkers program for before registered iPad, point of sale. Because PayPal has
Right.
its own, point of sale system for iPads
Right.
as
Right.
well. So, yes, that's really interesting. It was
they
the
like
timing.
they
was
sent out a
great.
press release during the middle of the event.
Yeah.
Like,
I
really
think
weird.
Ryan's actually onto something too with the step back, and I think
Yeah.
the step back. I think it might have been they decided to take a step back because
Yeah.
all of that. People might just not be ready for that kind of situation. To us, it sounds normal to walk into a place, have the barista say, "Oh, hi, Drew.
Yeah.
Get the coffee, and then I don't have to do anything." Like we know it's secure, but most consumers don't. Whereas this hardware, it's beautiful,
Right.
but it looks more like a register.
Right, and they're
Right.
maybe they're starting to focus more on the merchant as opposed to the consumer side
Right.
of things, which
So it
like
might be a
they've
little
been
bit
doing
of
both
both.
of. Yeah. Well, that's all the time we have this week, but thank you for watching and tune in next week.